Good morning one more time, everybody, and thanks for being a part of this morning. You're here at church. Maybe some friends and family are getting that last-minute summer vacation in, but you're here, and I'm so glad it worked out that way. My name is Garrett, and I serve on our team here and often get a chance to give this next few minutes, which is to open the Word of God with you. And one idea as we head that way, have you ever had the feeling, even as an adult, I just need to grow up, or how does an adult grow up? I need to keep growing here. We tend to, even as adults, prize growth. I think particularly in our city, like most people are going somewhere. And as I look at this room, like you people got plans, like you're trying to grow. You're trying to grow in your career, your education, like you're looking to go somewhere. And that's a great thing, by the way. That's not a critique. That's not a knock. That's a great thing. And so you're motivated. You're trying to go somewhere with your lives. And even as adults, we want to continue to grow. I remember as a kid, I know I do still need to grow up in some ways. I remember when I was a kid, one thing that my mom would do that drove me nuts was she would always do this like deep sigh. Like if something just got in her way or was bothersome, it was just like, there'd be one of those got turned loose in our home pretty regularly. And I remember, of course, arrogantly and innocently in a way, at 12 years old or whatever, being like, what is so bad? It's just like small, like chill out, and not understanding what it's like to have the weight of a household on you. But I thought, when I'm the adult, I'm not going to be so negative, why is everyday life so hard for you people? I remember being like just mystified, like what's not to have fun, And now I'm 36 and I deep sigh, and my 4-year-old deep sighs. That's how I know I got a problem. Like I literally, my kid will go, like can't get the books on the bookshelf when I tell her to clean up, and it's like, this is terrible. Literally will say, this is terrible. And I'm like, I need to grow up. That's why my 4-year-old does that, this is imitation. Like she's imitating me, and I deep sigh like I said I would never do. I need to continue growing up in the ways of patience and positivity. So I am going to assume this morning that you're already sold, for the most part, that adults need to keep growing up. Even though it's kind of surprising, even when we're kids, we call them, even a synonym for adult is what? Grown up. Like we assume the process is already done. Like, oh, you already did that. But then you become an adult and you realize, I have a lot of growing still left to do. Not in terms of height necessarily, but perhaps in my depth of understanding, the way I understand myself, the world, God, other people, the society, this world, and what I'm supposed to do in it. Psychologists are in favor, by the way, of adult growth as well. They give a couple of reasons. Here's a few. These are not hard to find. Lifelong learning supports brain plasticity. So the brain's ability to reorganize and form new connections throughout life, not just when you're a child, is key. Psychosocial development, there's a social element to that. You become a better neighbor whenever you learn more about the world and you continue growing as a person. It helps you serve future generations. Also, adaptability and resilience. So that we're in a fast-changing world. It's good for you to learn and relearn how to meet the moment again and again. It's part of adult growth, right? So I'm going to assume most of that you already buy into, that it's good for adults to continue growing in some way. But that pesky word at the front is how. Not why. I'm going to assume why is already sold and you're a person who wants to grow. But how does an adult grow? Because sometimes when we bump up against that part of our lives where we're like, I want to grow past that, I just can't. I want to grow past that, I just can't. I'd love to turn the mental page here, but I just can't. I'd love to react differently, but seemingly I just can't. How does an adult actually begin to grow? That's what we'll talk about today. Our text from which we'll be studying this idea is in the book of Galatians. You just heard it read. Galatians, of course, not being a book, but literally being a letter from the Apostle Paul, an early Christian leader, servant, probably the most famous missionary that the world has ever known. He traveled around the Mediterranean rim, spreading the then new message of Jesus Christ and founding churches everywhere he went. And after founding a church in what is Galatia, that is today modern-day Turkey, central modern-day, the country of Turkey, he then had a habit of, after planting a church, he would kind of look over his shoulder and write letters to these churches to keep them growing, to keep people spiritually growing. I don't mean numerically, but spiritually growing. He wrote, inspired by the Holy Spirit, wrote scriptures that we still honor today. And by the way, they keep us growing. So we'll study this today with the question on our minds, how does an adult continue to grow? If you feel stuck in some regard, my hope, prayer, and even confidence in God is that maybe you could be a little less stuck today and you could grow in some way. That would be the dream. That's what I'm trusting God for. And I hope that you'll listen with your hopes up instead of down. If you have a redundant struggle in your life, whether it's a habit, whether it's a substance, whether it's a pattern of thinking or a complex or something like that, I hope that I can get just a little bit of hope out of you here on the front end that growth is actually possible, not because of humans or people or these next few minutes, but because of only the power of God. I want your hopes up that growth for you can actually happen in some key ways. So we'll stop 3 times and see some ways that God, I believe, is revealing to us that growth can happen. Here goes. This is Galatians chapter 4, 1 through 2. I mean that the heir, so now this is a metaphor. Paul, the author, he's mid-argument, you're mid-movie here. This is the start of the second half, of 6-chapter book, starting chapter 4. He's using a metaphor about growing up. I mean that the heir, as long as he's a child, meaning the person who's going to inherit later while he's a child, is no different from a slave. Even though he's technically the owner of everything, he's the heir, he's still under guardians and managers until the date set by his father. So he's using, from the Greco-Roman societal reference point, he's using his surroundings, in which, by the way, slavery was not the slavery we think of in terms of American history. This was more of an indentured servitude, kind of a bonded employment situation. I'll get into the details of that another time. But Paul's drawing on his societal surroundings, and he's saying, you know what? Picture 2 4-year-old boys and one of them is an indentured servant and the son of an indentured servant, or the child of an indentured servant, and the other is the child of the owner of the house. Well, guess what? They both are having the same experience as a 4-year-old because nobody's taken ownership of anything yet prior to the date set by the parent, right? So Paul's picking up on this. One thing about kids is they don't own anything. It doesn't matter what your dad owns. You're 4, like you're 6. You don't own anything. And part of growing up is starting to take ownership. So to get out of Paul's specifics and zoom out to a principle level for a bit, we could say this. In summary, growing up means thinking like an owner. Growing up means thinking like an owner. If you want to grow up, you stop thinking of yourself, conceptualizing of yourself as only the sum of your environment, right? But you start to think of yourself as an independent actor. You start to realize I have some agency here, and you start to think like an owner. It says, back to explain the text, one commentator put it this way: prior to his or her coming of age, the minor child has no right to dispose of the property that he or she will inherit. The child likewise does not have authority over his or her own person or actions. When you're a child, you are much more at the whims of your environment, your parents, your friends, your social environment, and so on. Growing up means, you know what? I now have the ability to act. I'm more than just the sum of the influences around me. I'm not a loose leaf blowing in the wind and the wind is determining everything here. I have some agency and I have some ownership of what? Of faith, of your actions, of how you feel. You can't control how others have acted towards you, but you can certainly control how you react towards them, right? So this is a huge gift, because it means you're saved from being condemned into a victim's mentality. You're saved from having to think, you know what? I'm only a slave to what my dad said or did. I'm only a slave to my mother's habits and the way that she raised me. I'm only a slave to my own past moral history. We're not at our best when we feel like we're trapped by the past. Because by the power of God, the power of the gospel, and the power of the Holy Spirit, not a single one of us is enslaved to the past. Now, I want to say this. And I've had just enough therapy to say this and mean it. Understanding the past is a good thing. I'm not saying you don't need to study and understand the forces that shaped you. I'm not saying you're supposed to say, that's the past, why would we dig it up? You should do the work of understanding this is the way things worked in my home of origin. This is the way my primary caregivers interacted with me. This is the way I was put together. This is the way I was shaped. This was my first interaction in high school with dating, and it was a negative one, and here's why. There's plenty to be gained from going back to understanding that other forces definitely got the first word on us before we could reply, right? But what I'm saying today is you do have the ability to reply to your life. How hopeless would it be to be like, all right, how hopeless would it be? We should shut down the church if this was a message. None of you would come back to hear, you know what, your futures have already been predicted by your past. Your future will be, being raised by your past, right? Enslaved to the past. The past is condemned to have, or the future is condemned to the past. The past has complete control over the future. You're not an owner of your future. You're just along for the ride. You know, if you have a mental issue, well, good luck. I don't know what to tell you. Hope the meds are strong enough. You know, like we all need to hear more than that. It's not to say the meds can't have a role, but I'm telling you, we all need to hear more than we are just along for the ride of what our parents, friends, circumstances have told us thus far. That's what Paul is saying here. He's saying, you know what? A child, and he's using an analogy here to describe the difference between a legal mentality of earning towards God versus a more mature mentality of trust towards God. That's the main argument he's making. But at a principled, eternal level, he's also saying, here's one thing that's always true. Kids are, much more than adults, at the whims of their surroundings and their circumstances. Adults are the people who learn to take ownership of their events, surroundings, who they're with, and not play a victim's mentality. Listen, I can always tell when I'm talking, let's say I'm sitting at like a community group or in some kind of an accountability environment where someone's going to make a confession. Strong confession always is that feeling of like, yeah, some friends might have helped me make a bad decision, but I'm the one who texted the friends, so it's on me. You know what I'm saying? Thinking like an owner. This is part of what growing up means, to say, you know what? I don't have to just submit to the fact that back there someone wronged me. I don't have to just submit to, I should understand that fact and how it affects me, but I don't have to submit to the fact that someone wronged me back there, or I lost my faith back there somewhere and now I guess I'm just along for the ride. You're not along for the ride, right? To grow up, if you want to keep growing, you'll have to do more than just study the past. That's a good move, by the way. You should do that. But you'll have to do more than that. You'll have to think, you know what, I have some agency over my future, and I am going to take whatever God-given amount of ownership he's given me. I'm going to depend on him, yes. I'm not saying I can control my life. I'm not talking about willing it. It's not willing it into existence anymore. What is it? Manifesting. Man, I'm not talking about manifesting, okay? That's wrong church. I'm not talking about manifesting stuff. We're going to depend on God. We can pray. That's a better tool than manifesting. Praying is like where you ask God to manifest things, because that's just not a power he's given you, frankly, be straight with you. And so I just want to tell you to realize, you know what, I'm moving forward dependently, and I may peer into the past to understand the past, and I'm going to go forward dependently, but I get to decide the attitude, the posture that I'm going to go forward with here, and to say, you know what, I am an owner of my faith, my actions, and I'm not just at the sum of my environment. That's a big, massive choice to realize, you know what, I've got ownership of where we go from here. It's part of growing up. There are plenty of 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and I would even say 70-year-olds who are way too busy blaming every environmental force in their life instead of understanding the environmental forces of their life and crafting a reply. Listen, once you've understood your environment, good. Don't stop till you do. How about you craft a reply by the power of God, and decide this is where I'm going to go from here. I might have wandered into an addiction. That's on me. Now, craft a reply. You see what I'm saying? Crafting a reply is part of what healthy people do. I'm not saying they rush to it either. So I'm not saying church life is supposed to be hopelessly pragmatic and fixy. I'm not saying that. I'm saying with understanding and purpose, craft a reply and move forward, right? That's part of growing up. He goes on, Paul does. In the same way, we also, when we were children, when we were kids, we were enslaved to the elementary principles of the world. Now, he clearly means something here. He's saying kids are subject, enslaved to, have no way out of the elementary principles of the world. And clearly, he is implying adults should get free of those elementary principles of the world. So the only question that remains is, what are the elementary principles of the world, right? It's not a super clear phrase. So he has something very specific in mind here, and scholarship goes a couple of different directions here. I'm convinced, personally, that Paul was kind of riffing off the fact that, the Greek philosophers had come up with this scheme where, you can boil all matter down to this, that, or other, and basically say, these are the elementary principles of the world. Earth, wind, fire kind of a thing, okay? And these are the elementary building blocks of the world. What Paul's doing here is saying, Like that, there is a social construct that's built this world, stuff that everybody knows, the elementary principles of the world. The only problem is most of it's wrong. And to grow up, you have to realize, the answers that were given to you at first might not be right. And growing up is realizing, you know what, there's some elementary ways that this society works that just might be wrong. They just might be wrong. I might have been taught wrong. All of us, when we're kids, as part of developmental life, all of us, when we're kids, we are given answers, right? To our most basic questions. Sometimes we get answers before we even know the questions to ask, okay? I was told Jesus is the way before I asked, is there a way? Like I was just told, like it was an elementary thing. Like it's just part of development, All of us are given some kind of answers when we are young. The problem is, as we grow up, unavoidably, you hit a moment where whether you were told Jesus is the way or something else is the way, there comes a time when you just wonder, is that true? Is the answer I've been carrying all this time, whether it's about God or something else, is that true, right? Or is that just one of those elementary principles to graduate from? Every person, this is normal. It feels so dangerous when you're the parent because you're like, oh no, she turned 13 and she has questions, like real ones, or oh no, he's a freshman in college. Like he has new ideas to interact with. How's this going to go, So it feels scary when you're the person who's already gone through it, but don't fool yourself into thinking that there's a way around it. The only way through is through it. Everybody must, when you're a kid, when you start to grow up from being a kid, you must come to a place, not where you're answering your questions, but you're questioning your answers. Someone's put answers in your back pocket, and it's part of growing up to say, you know what, I've got the courage to look in at what are my real questions here. Even if someone tried to settle the issue for me when I was 7 years old, the issue is now unsettled. I've got to question the answer that I was given, and then we'll see where it lands on the other side. It feels dangerous and risky, but I've got to question the elementary principles that I was coached into here, right? One commentator puts it this way about what these elementary principles were for the Galatians, about the social structures they were living in. It's a quote at length, but I think it's clarifying, so we'll read it. Not the Bible, just a commentator, but I think a good one. What are these enslaving powers from which Christ redeemed the Galatians? In Paul's usage here, they are the basic fundamental principles upon which social reality, quote, the world, of human systems, interaction, and activity is constructed, and by which it is governed. In other words, it's the way the world works. They are especially the categories, like those listed but swept aside in a previous chapter, that divide humanity, order humanity, and create hierarchy within social reality, as well as the rationales that undergird them. They are the rules and values. That's the elementary principles of the world that you were given. It's unavoidable. They are the rules and values that each child, born into and confronted with the society that had long since taken shape on the basis of such rules and values, must inevitably internalize, accept, and live by. Because no 9-year-old is going to buck the system, right? You must internalize the elementary principles of the world to get by. They are the individual parts of the way the world works, to which each child must adapt himself or herself, by which each child must be willingly constrained as his or her mind practices and life trajectory are shaped thereby. The principles are happiest. Listen to this personification. This is sharp. These principles are happiest when the child arrives at his or her grave without having questioned them. This is the slavery into which every person is born, in which most never recognize. Most people, all people are handed a set of answers. Most people don't realize that those answers are happiest when you just let it rest. Whether the answers are good or bad, most people just never realize they're living under a constructed system, an elementary set of assumptions that may or may not be true. Growing up means questioning your answers. Let's put it that way. Growing up means at some point, I'm not talking about forever, I'm not talking about getting stuck in agnosticism, not saying that. I'm saying there's a phase where you go, I'm going to ask a question or two here that might make my grandmother nervous, and that's okay, And because I've got to dig around, or I'll never come around on the other, I'll never land on the other side with certainty, right? There comes a time in your life where if your parents or grandparents or whoever influenced you towards God, there comes a time in your life where it's no longer good enough that they want you to come to church. You got to figure out if you want to. There comes a time when you cannot coast on your parents' faith any longer. You cannot coast on your roommate's faith any longer. There comes a time when all they can say is, we did our best. Go with God. Hopefully, literally, go with God. But we did our best. At this point, you get to decide, are these answers that we gave you good enough? And you won't know until you question them. Look, I'm raising 2 kids. That makes them pastors' daughters. That's strange to me. There are 2 pastors' daughters in my home. One day, they're gonna ask me. I hope we've fostered the authenticity to where they will at least ask me instead of Google. But like one day they will ask me stuff about the Christian worldview, and they're gonna poke holes in it, and they're gonna wonder, is Dad just saying what his dad said to say? And they're gonna wonder, is this all some chain of human construct? They're gonna have to question the answers. We're not doing that now, okay? We're giving them answers now. We're supposed to, okay? We're not creating a lot of space right now in the kids ministry for existential dread that a 25-year-old is doing. Okay, they're back there doing absolutely true, absolutely true. Everything the Bible says is absolutely true. Okay, that's where they're at. Okay, we're giving them the answer. Okay, like we're saying this is the answer, and we're not ashamed of that. That's what your kid's going to get. Heads up, that's what your kid gets back there. All right, so we are downloading the Christian worldview. All right, we're not sorry. That's what we're here to do. But we recognize there's going to come a day when, is it absolutely true? Who said it's absolutely true? Is this some kind of am I in an echo chamber? Is this just my surroundings? Healthy people do that. They question their answers. I'm not saying they get stuck here forever, but they say, you know what, like Thomas, I'm going to reach out to Jesus. Not I'm going to reach out to Satan or something else. I'm going to reach out to Jesus and say, you know what, my rediscovery process is going to be good enough for him. My rediscovery of him will be good enough for him. I want to tell you, I've long ago abandoned the hope that New Yorkers would come to church with questions, hoping I will answer them via a sermon, and that I will be able to answer their questions, and they will think, that is helpful. I have a way humbler goal. If I could just get a New Yorker to come in here, sure of how the world works, and sure that I'm crazy, and if I could just get them to leave questioning their answers that they already have, that's good enough. Because they already got answers. They already know how the world works, and they know they know this, that, or other, and they got their elementary principles down. I have a way humbler goal. I know in 25 minutes every Sunday, or 45 as the case may be, I know. But however long the sermon is, I know during that time window, I can't do that much work. I can't delete a file and download a whole program, on their operating system. I can't do that. I'm not trying to do that right now, but I'll tell you this. If you're sure Jesus is fake, I just hope you leave questioning that answer. You already got your answer. I just hope maybe to put something, a little pebble in your shoe, just to make you uncomfortable enough to take it out and look at it later to question your answer, right? It's a better approach, by the way, for your coworkers too, by the way. If you're like, how come no one has ever gone to lunch with me, like at work, and like we just go on a lunch break, and one day they're just like raging, and at the end of the lunch, they just want to serve God. How come that's never happened? It takes time. Settle for getting people to question their answers, all right? It takes time. That's normal. And I want to tell you, the answers that our world is giving, they deserve to be questioned, okay? What happens is we're good at picking on other societies and places and times for their blind spots, and how come they didn't question their elementary principles, Well, look, we need to do ours the same. Like, it's easy for us, for instance, to say, what the elementary principles of the Galatians were, I don't know, that Zeus is real and he throws lightning bolts when he's angry. And so a lightning storm means Zeus is mad. Everybody knows back then, that that's how it works. And you're thinking, did anybody think to question that answer? That's wild right there. You know what I mean? Like adults were believing this, It's easy on a more serious and close to home note. It's easy to say in my beloved home state of Texas, in 1840, everybody knew that oppressive chattel slavery was okay. Everybody knew. And when nowadays we look back and we're like, did most people not think, hey, we should re-examine that? Or in 1920, in my same beloved state of Texas, the Jim Crow was okay. Everybody knew that some people eat at the front of the restaurant, some people eat at the back. Everybody knew that. And nowadays we're looking at that going, how come nobody thought, or at least few people thought to question that from within the society? But it's so easy to do that. It's easy. It doesn't take courage to do what I just did. That's easy, right? These are America's, there's Greek mythology is an easy target. America's most famous sins are an easy target, right? But think about what everybody knows if they just live and breathe the air we're in now. Like what is an 18-year-old's like toolkit by the time they've gone through public school in our beloved city? What does an 18-year-old know by the time they've gone for 18 years of public school in New York City? Do they know, I'll take a few guesses, they know that there's no God and that gods are just kind of fictitious things that people tell themselves within each other's tradition. And agnosticism is really the way that people get along, right? So don't commit, because confidence in this area is arrogance. Do they know that kind of a thing? Like, do they know that human sexuality is best as a free-for-all, and the one thing that you can't do is tell anyone that God has an idea about human sexuality? Does everybody know in this society one of the answers that's just given, that mental gender and physical gender have no relationship, and that the mind has total say and the body's information is irrelevant? Like, does everybody know that? I want to tell you something. Every one of those answers, those are worth questioning. Those are answers that the world is saying loud and clear, and they're worth questioning. And I'm telling you they're worth questioning because they are. And I want to tell you, you should have the courage to do that, okay? I deny. What I'm telling you is stay curious. Even if you're not convinced of Christianity, have the courage to stay curious. You know what I mean? Question what you're told. Think a little bit and be like, you know what? I deny that I am a bigot for asking the question. Like, we're living in a world where if you even question that dogma, it just sounds like you've got some closet phobia of somebody. I'm telling you right now, I don't have a closet phobia of anybody. I have an open love for the truth. Question your programming and ask yourself, does it make sense? Does it make sense that every person's brain and body would have zero relationship? Or is it very likely that the mind and body were meant to be a unity? You know, ask yourself these questions. Question your answers of what you're being told. It'll make you a bold person, it'll make you a sharp person, and it will not remove, contrary to what is often told, it will not remove any of your kindness. You won't thereby be unkind for turning your brain on, think about these things. You're not unloving to your niece or nephew to whom these categories apply, or your cousin or your coworker or whoever, just because you're thinking about the elementary principles that, remember what it said? It said the principles are happiest when you arrive at your grave without having questioned these things, right? Have the boldness to ask. Growing up means questioning your answers. All right, last bit back to the text. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son. Now it's going to get really familial. We're in the growing up metaphor, so everything's very familial. God sent his son, just so you know it's personal. Jesus is God's son, and he was born of a woman, fully human, fully God. So he's God's son, and he's a woman's son. So he's fully man and he's fully God. Born under the law, born under the reign of the Old Testament, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoptions as sons. Meaning, if you're under the law, you have to earn everything you get. But whenever you're a child, you don't have to earn it. You're just in the family. And Jesus came to make that kind of a familial bridge to God, so that we might receive adoption as sons. So there's sons a second time. And because you are sons, that means the children of God, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So all of a sudden, Abba is a term of familiarity. It's like dad. All of a sudden, we've taken an extremely familial and familiar-like turn, very intimate now. We're no longer talking about the Old Testament versus New Testament. We're no longer talking about societal constructs and all that. We're talking about a God who loves you so much that he sent his son to die in your place, and his Spirit to dwell inside you. So a very subjective reality that we get to experience, crying, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then an heir through God. Meaning, whenever you come to a trust in God, you go from trying to be his uneasy employee who's not good at the job description of being good, and you become his child who is free to love, to engage, and to follow a loving father, right? Before you become God's child by faith in Christ, what happens is this place and those like it smell like becoming God's employees. Like, these are the people who want to work for God. I don't want to, but other people do. And most of them are bad at it anyway, because they're all inconsistent anyway, because they're still human. And just because they want to work for God doesn't mean that, their stuff doesn't stink or whatever. And everybody knows that, like, before they come to that understanding of, this is faith and sonship and daughterhood through Christ. That's the way, what's really going on in here. Before you come to that understanding, this place feels like, people in there working for God and trying to be good. And Paul's saying that's immature. Growing up means realizing I'm his child already. So in a strange turn, Growing up means staying a child. If you want to mature in your faith, in your walk, in your life, in your decisions, in your whole worldview, become a child of God, right? Stay a child. Notice, even in the Paul's going the grow up route. Grow up now. Grow up now. Hey, question the elementary principles of the world. You need to grow up out of just your societal programming here. Grow up, everybody. Hey, don't be like the person who is 4 years old and whether they own the place or work for the place doesn't have any control. Take ownership and outgrow the elementary principles of the world. But then this sharp turn to, and don't forget, you're still a kid. You're God's kid. And you need to be dependent. You need to, what all's involved in that? Dependence, humility, a willingness to keep growing. What happens, I think, one of the reasons adults quit growing is they quit wanting to or thinking it's okay, right? You're going to continue to grow, and you should, and that's part of remaining a child. So growing up means staying a child, in a sense, by faith. The environments, as I get older, quickly, the environments where I get to be a kid are less and less. But when they come around every once in a while, I notice them, and I value them in ways that I never did when I was a kid. Let me explain. In our home now, I am the first one awake every day. We finally, by the way, I'm glad to report, our kids will at least stay in their room until 7 a.m. So we got that trained, we're good. So what happens is every morning, I'm the first mover. My alarm goes off at 5 o'clock. I get the coffee ready. Gabby's alarm goes off at 5:30. The coffee is delivered. Amen, to her, and all she's got to do is oh, there's the coffee, boom. And so, but then we got an hour and a half, we're going to read, we're going to pray, and but I'm the first mover, and I like it. I get to be dad, I get to be husband, and I'm the first one moving around the house. That's great. But when I go to my grandmother's house, I'm 36, she's 76. I wake up, she's already moving in the kitchen. And it feels good. And it's not just because I'm about to eat good, although that's part of it. It smells good. There's going to be biscuits and gravy involved, which I love. I'm like a Southerner, and I get that. I own that. I'm not trying to outrun that. Biscuits and gravy all day. So she's cooking it up, making it, and it's not just, oh, this is going to taste good, although it will. It's, I'm a kid today. And if I walk out and I'm like, hey, Grandma, you need anything? She's going to be like, what? No. Go to bed. I'll call you when this is ready. She doesn't want my help. You know what I'm saying? And it just feels good to be here I'm a kid, And then separate household. So her and my granddad divorced many, many years ago. Separate household. Another granddad lives 15, 20 minutes down the road. Same thing, but his version of it is he's 78. And so I go over to his house and he's like, you guys want to take the boat out? I'm like, well, yeah, we want to take the boat out. And so we come up and he's done washed the boat. He's 78 years old, done washed the boat. It's ready to go. He's checked he does engines. I don't do engines. He tried, but I just don't do engines. So he understands everything about it, and it's just ready. And all we got to do is get on, And I'm like, it's good to be a kid every once in a while. It's good to be a kid, and enjoy it while you can. I will tell you, just enjoy it. My mom and dad have already passed away. You got to enjoy these environments while you can. So similarly, God never wants you to graduate from being a son or a daughter. It's just some things you don't really graduate from. There's some things you just don't need to graduate from. You're supposed to be a son. You're supposed to be a daughter. You're supposed to be dependent. You're supposed to let God be the first mover. You know what I'm saying? You're supposed to. Can you imagine? How demoralizing would it be? You're like, all right, I'm up before God, and I bring in the coffee. I'm like, God, wake up. I need you. That doesn't work, right? We need to know He never slept. He's the first mover. He's the place you get to be a kid. I don't know why my dad would say stuff like this, but he just would randomly throw it out with great pride. But before, I think he was maybe sick with cancer or almost about to be, but it was his style regardless. But it was maybe a year and a half before he passed away or something. And I was Dad came into the guest room where we had stayed in his house in Texas, and he was like, was the bed comfortable? Are you guys good or whatever? We're like, yeah, Dad, we were good, man, we were good. And he was like, and for some reason, he would just throw out stuff like, my kids can always come to my house. And we're like, okay, Dad, I don't think anybody said to the contrary. We're good, But it was one of his things where he was like, my kids can come in my house whenever you want. And, there are just some things where I think parents like that. You know what I'm saying? Parents like to be the parent. I don't want to wake up to the sound of my child in the kitchen. I'm like, something's wrong, and now I have to go out, It's not the way things work. But I do like being the last one to move whenever it's my parent or grandparent, right? Similarly with God, God's not looking for you to be the first one to move. He's always the one, right? He's a place where you can hide out and you can be a kid. It is good for adults to have
like some amount of childlike, and this produces joy. It's good for people to have some amount of childlike joy. You ever walked in a church and you just take one look around and you think this, I'm not trying to judge. However, nobody in here has had any fun since like Carter was president. Like it's way too stuffy in here. When's the last time somebody laughed until they cried? Like when's the last time somebody had like fun? You know what I mean? Listen, fun is not the point of God, right? But I'm telling you, joy is part of being a child in the presence of a father, you know? Being a kid is in mindset. You know, Jesus said, unless you become like a child, you can't enter the kingdom. So this is not an optional encouragement. If you want to enter the kingdom, you will have to embrace your childhood and your dependence on God. So growing up means staying a child. Growing up means three things today. It means thinking like an owner. You're more than just the sum of your circumstances that have acted on you to this point. Yes, many forces have acted on you to this point. You should understand them. You should know them. There's lots of homework involved in that. However, those are not a boundary limiting what is possible for your life, right? Think like an owner. Growing up means questioning your answers. What are those things that everybody knows, you know, that a few decades or centuries from now we'll think, that was a dumb thing to know because it wasn't real, you know? So growing up means being willing to question your answers, even if it takes great courage and letting God resettle your worldview and lay the foundation stones firmer than us with paranoia trying to protect it. God doesn't need a protection from the questions. Growing up also means staying a child. So I want to encourage you, if you are in a spot where you're far from God, or you're not sure that you are walking with him, or you're just not sure where you stand with him, be a kid while you can and embrace him and all that he wants you to be and all that he wants to offer you. Let's pray together and let's worship him. God, you are our Father, and that's the way you meant it to work. God, thank you that in you we don't find fear of tinkering. In you, we don't find condemnation for the past. In you, we find forgiveness. From you, we find clarity. From you, we find hope. From you, we find direction. From you, we find everything. We find more of what it means to be human. So when we find you, we find more of ourselves and vice versa. Lord, will you help every heart just be willing to take a childlike move toward you in faith and in trust. Lord, growing up is hard, and this world, this broken world, presses upon us the wrong conclusions, the wrong skill set. The world tells us, toughen up, don't show pain or struggle. The world tells us, don't admit fault. The world tells us that we're trapped by our circumstances, there's no way out. The world tells us very discouraging and condemning things about self and others. But Lord, you are the Father of us all, from whom every family on earth is named. And Lord, you have the capacity and ability to bring us into who we're trying to become. Lord, show us today that who we're becoming, who we want to become, is in your power. Our career path is not going to be the thing that makes us who we were designed to be. Our next degree is not going to make us the thing we were meant to be. It might assist us in some handhold-ish way along the way. But ultimately, the keys to who we're becoming are in your hand and your power. We recognize that you are a better parent than our jobs, our spouses, or the people we're dating, or a sense of freedom or an experience we're chasing. You are the one who holds the power of all growth. Move us forward towards yourself. Grow us. Help us not resent the growth because it means we weren't already perfect. And help us be your children and act like your children in great innocence and joy. It's in Christ's name we pray this prayer.